few years ago, did some training in the art of hosting. And that changed my practice fundamentally. And it has stayed with me ever since. And for that, it's more of a, I guess, facilitation focused, but it's also about building relationships. It's about co-creating the whole, if it's about me, don't do it without me kind of thing. And I find that when you focus on the relationships, everything else is so much easier. If you are too focused on getting whatever delivered, then you leave people behind, and they're the people who need to actually make the change. Yeah, I think relationship building is absolutely key to change management, whether it's change management as a professional or a practice.
Welcome to the Inner Game of Change, where we explore the thinking that shapes how change really happens in the workplace. In this warm and deeply human conversation, I speak with change practitioner and Australasian Change Days convener, Sarah Glenister, about the relationships that quietly shape how change is experienced. We explore trust, uncertainty, informal influence, the limits of plans and timelines, and why the real work of change often happens through conversations that cannot be easily measured. We also consider whether strong relationships can turn uncertainty from anxiety into curiosity, and what a human connection may mean as AI becomes more embedded in our working lives. I am grateful to have Sarah chatting with me today. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me in the Inner Game of Change podcast. I am eternally grateful for your time.
Oh, it's so nice to catch up with you, Ali, after London. It was a delight to meet you, and it's a delight to connect with you again.
That was so wonderful. For my audience, Sarah and I met online for a number of years now, and then we met in person at the Global Change Awards recently in London, and that was a wonderful time, which is actually part of what we're going to cover today, which is around relationships, connections. But before we start, Sarah, the question that I usually start asking my guests, what has been occupying your thoughts recently in terms of work?
Recently, gosh, I think it's how we hold the balance between the work that we know that needs to be done in an organisation and that you can see, and the demand, for want of a better word, for a schedule. Yes. and deliverables and all the things that, for me, don't quite line up with what I think needs to be done, because it's all very timelines and deliverables and that kind of thing. And you can't make behaviour change happen in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or that kind of thing. And so it's this kind of balance between the deliverables and the work. I think particularly in the position that I'm in at the moment, that's been a real tension for me.
So somebody's decided that a change would need to happen according to a time frame. But then something inside of you thinking, should we not think about the value rather than be driven by other things? Am I reading this?
So for example, it's a change from having an IT service, and they're going from a combination of walk up and ticketing to only ticket service. And there's a whole lot of behaviour change around that in terms of how they interact with the customer, who then is still going to turn up, and how they interact with that and how they explain to the customer without getting worked up if the customer's upset about not being able to get their demands met immediately. Yeah. And that kind of training and uplift is quite difficult to do in a short period of time. And how do you talk to them about, it's not just providing good customer service, but it's how you're dealing with authority and you're dealing with people who are stressed because their systems aren't working or whatever. So yeah, that's quite hard it's easy to produce this is my plan for doing that. But I can't say, and by this date, I will have delivered. And then by this date, I will have delivered that. So I'm finding that quite difficult at the moment. Yeah.
Which is a segue to what we're talking about today. There's always a tension between building relationships and connections and positive connections in the workplace. I'll share with you something. There's an index. Do you know that there is actually a World Happiness Index?
I do know that, yes.
And there's also another one called the Certainty Index. And the World Happiness Index talks about trust and social connection as the strongest predictors of well-being and satisfaction. And yet, when we talk about change in the workplace, we often focus on, you just exactly mentioned that, budgets and scope.
Yeah.
And in our search for certainty, we focus on those three parameters. But then one of the predictors of a successful change is that how do we bring the people along the proverbial journey? That is actually pretty much around the human connection and the meaning behind the change. And so how do we reconcile those two opposing forces?
I think it's really hard, and I think that what I find myself doing is appeasing the people who need the schedule and who need the timelines and everything by giving them something probably fairly generic in my head, like in terms of, well, by this day I've done a workshop, I'll have created some artifacts, that kind of thing. But I know that's just the superficial level, because the real work is done by talking to people and working with people and exploring with them why they would find it very difficult to say no to this particular person. And it might be a power thing. It might be that person is seen as quite a senior person, and that's why they would feel concerned about saying it. Or maybe they feel that what the job is will only take a short time, and so they're worried about looking like they're trying to pad it out. So it's interesting. So I find myself, like, I guess in my head going, this is the real work, and I'll keep going on and doing that. But in the meantime, I will give the people who need the schedule and the timelines and the things, I will give them what they need to kind of keep them quiet and deliver what they need to deliver as well.
And from my experience, not many people talk about, they do talk about you're going to have to engage and create meaning and all of that, but that's not really in the roadmap. That's actually pretty much relying on the project team and the change manager and the project manager, interpersonal skills, influence skills, credibility, and understanding the meaning behind the change and trying to influence on how a project is being managed. Is it because things like relationship building the connection, creating meaning, is that because this is really hard because some people think this is the fluff stuff?
Not sure that it maybe, but I'm not sure that it's hard, that people see it as hard. I think it's the opposite. I think people see it as easy, and why are you wasting your time doing that? And it's also really hard as the change person. You're sitting around a table going through the weekly updates or the status reports and all of that kind of stuff. And you hear about, we're going red for this and green for that, and amber for this. And you kind of go, I'm just green because I'm just keep going doing what I need to do. But it's hard to quantify what you're doing, and you're in an environment that wants everything quantified. And I think that's hard. It's hard for you as the change person, but it's also hard in how you're perceived by other people. What are they doing? They're just talking to people, or they're just having a meeting, or they're just talking about relationships and things like that. So I think it's hard. I think it's hard both ways.
How hard is it for a change professional when they join a new organization and they join a new team, and then there's a change ready to be rolled out, and there is no existing or established relationship with the impacted groups? How hard is that?
Look, I find every change job I think that difficult for different reasons. I always try and take a bit of a stock take about where they're up to with what comms they've already had.
Yeah.
What are the relationships already? How does this team or organisation communicate? I try and do that pretty early on because really tells you a bit more about what will land and what won't. I find it quite hard to come in when someone else has been in the change role and then left for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Because often they've been maybe quite process driven, or they do things quite differently to maybe how I would have done it. And so I don't want to undermine or anything that they've done, but I find it quite difficult to pick it up as well. It's difficult like going into a new organisation.
It is difficult mainly because there's a correlation between time spent with people and relationship building. And yet the project is driven by delivery and timeline and date and all of that. How many times you've heard a conversation, you join an organization, let's just say you're a contractor, you got asked to join a team, and how many times you hear a conversation with the project manager saying, just do this, do this, yeah? And all the time. And I'm not saying project managers are bad, but I'm just saying they also are driven by their own parameters. But we're talking to the leadership here. If a leader cares about how the change is going to be adopted and how people feel about the change experience, they can still manage that within the time frame of the project. They just need to pay a little bit of attention to it. And the most important thing also is that it should not really be outsourced to the change person in there. Yeah. And actually, I coach managers that I work with, and I'll be saying, if I were you, I'll be very interested in this. Because if a change is going to come your way, it's going to impact the dynamics of the team, it's going to impact the relationships, it's going to impact the morale of the team. Some of it will actually threaten identities and destroy relationships sometimes. So should you not be interested in seeing the design of the change and the project and how this is going to impact your team?
Also saying, you could say, if you have a good relationship with them, of course, you could say things like, what would it mean for you if you were only 50% successful in this change?
Yeah.
Because if you don't pay attention to the change stuff and the people side of things, then you're not going to get the kind of change that you want. You're not going to, the project will wind up, the business as usual will take over, and then it will slowly over time, or maybe not slowly, go back to the way we've always done things around here. And that's a significant cost to organisations if they actually don't see this real change. And I think that's the same for like a lot of the AI stuff. There's all this big push to introduce AI and all that kind of stuff. But unless there's something that's carrying that through that people will be able to adopt through their entire work life, as soon as the project is over, it will just go back to the way that, back to Excel, back to doing things the way we used to do. Yeah.
I would like to cover AI at some stage in the conversation. I've been reading a book called Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadow. And one of the things that she talks about is that some of the most important forces in a system at work are invisible. And when I was thinking about have this conversation with you, I started thinking our relationships are part of those hidden forces or invisible forces. And this takes me back to my previous question is around, is it because it's invisible or a nice to have, but not a must have, and therefore there's not really much attention paid to it?
You mean to change management? Or
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I started out in change, it wasn't really called change management, and it was something you did as part of your job. So you were doing your day job, and then
it's a good practice.
20% of the time you were doing something else, introducing a change of some sort. And this was in the health system that I was working in. And a lot of managers were necessarily calling themselves proficient in change, but if their teams needed to change to do something, then it was at that level of the manager was doing it with some additional resources. But things have changed so much over the last 20 odd, 30 odd years, however many years it's been. And managers and leaders just don't have the time to do the things that they would have done 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that's part of the issue, is that it's been outsourced to another person like me to do things that were potentially part of a role 20 or 30 years ago, because there are so many demands on managers and leaders now that they just don't have that headspace to look at doing things differently. And I think there's benefits in that, getting fresh eyes and all of that kind of stuff. But I think there's also a little bit of maybe a bit of a judgment thing about, maybe I could have done this in my role if I had been more organised, or if I knew my team better, or if I understood the technology more, or whatever the change was. Yeah, I think the nature of change management has changed so much since I got into the field that it's really hard to recognise it from 30 years ago.
I want to share with you, and please feel free to critique me on this. I do mention often something to most people that I come across, and I coach some people as well in the business, that we are in the job or we are in the business of influence and relationship building. What we do is not the job.
No.
And some people will get it, some people will not get it. How can I simplify this to people to say change is a human, an organization is a system, and part of that system is the human aspect of it. And the whole idea of a change management professional has landed because the human side was actually recognized as the most important piece or element in the whole equation. So when I talk to people around being an influencer and a relationship builder, is there any other way for me to articulate that better?
I'm not sure. So I have discussions all the time with people like Gilbert.
There you go, Gilbert.
About whether change management is a profession or whether it's a practice or whether it's both. And so I think change management as a practice is something that everyone can do and everyone can do better. And I think
so that's the doing part of it.
It's just, it's like being a facilitator or a coach. There's a coaching practice as well as being a coach in a profession. I think for me, one of the things that is hard is that so many people are in the change profession from completely different backgrounds. And part of me thinks for a profession, you need almost like a recognized pathway or recognized, set of skills to be considered a profession. And maybe that's why we struggle so much. But the change management as a practice is all about how you interact and how you make things easier at work for people. It's not just at work, but most of our stuff is at work. So how can I make the change or the new technology or the new focus going to a customer-centric organisation or a stakeholder, shareholder focused organisation or whatever it is, how can you make that journey easier for people? And that then, if you have change management as a practice, it doesn't become the problem or owned by one person who's the change manager. It's owned by everyone. It's owned by the leadership team and the managers and everybody else because they need to be in practice. Yeah.
I call this the change experience because everybody is responsible about the change experience. Whether you're a sponsor, or you are a delivery project manager, or you are a change manager, or you're a manager of the actual receiving team, or you are team members. Everybody is responsible around that change experience. You can end up with a negative change experience. You can end up with a positive, inspiring change experience. And the landmarks or the signs of each one of those are pretty clear. You can see that in surveys. You can see that in adoption measures. You can see all of that. I want to shift gear and ask you around if it is a practice. And we usually end up with almost two types of relationships. We call them formal relationships and informal ones. But I always find the informal ones are far more effective than the formal ones. What's your take on that?
You can never get past the informal relationships that in the what used to be called the executive assistants network. They knew everything, and as soon as you made gain in that environment, then getting your message out was much, much easier. Look, quite a few years ago, did some training in the art of hosting, and that changed my practice fundamentally, and it has stayed with me ever since. And for that, it's more of a, I guess, facilitation focused. But it's also about building relationships. It's about co-creating the whole, if it's about me, don't do it without me kind of thing. And I find that when you focus on the relationships, everything else is so much easier. If you are too focused on getting whatever delivered, then you leave people behind, and they're the people who need to actually make the change. Yeah, I think relationship building is absolutely key to change management, whether it's change management as a professional or a practice.
You almost get into... This is the negative change experience. You almost get into a place where you're going to tick the boxes that you've done it. There's a joke. It's not a good joke, but I'm going to say it anyway, just because I can.
The dad joke.
I don't know if it's a dad joke, but if there's this conversation, I am like you coming to me as a surgeon, and you'll be saying, "Hi, Ali, how was the surgery?" I'll be saying to you, "Sarah, it was fantastic. I ticked all the boxes." And then you'll be saying to me, "Wonderful, that's great. I'm really glad for you." And then somebody else will be asking, "So how is the patient?" And I said, "No, the patient died, but I ticked all the boxes."
Yeah.
And it's not a nice joke, but always reminds me that who cares about the boxes if at the end of the day we haven't really delivered the meaning and the value. And this question, like I talk to always executives and sponsors, and I'll be saying something like this. And many of them probably, they listen to this conversation, they know. I'll be saying to them something like, hold me accountable at the end of this project. And you need to find out whether there was meaning and there was adoption and there was a positive change experience or not. But you also have a role in this. So unless we do that, I can tick the boxes and then there's no meaning. And unfortunately, I'm not talking out of school here. I see it all the time. And I love my network, but my network is also responsible about some of the negative experiences that we're having.
Yeah.
Did you like the joke?
Sure. That's
But
right.
imagine a medical professional. Yeah. They are on a mission to make somebody's life easier.
Yeah.
And they're driven with do no harm and all of these things. And wouldn't it be great if we have a code of conduct in the change management space to actually abide by this and swear by this, that I am not going to leave this project unless I actually make sure that I abided by my code of conduct.
Yeah. And it's actually quite hard as well, because it's for me, but I find it very hard to stay in my lane when I see things happening that are doing a particular thing, or that they really shouldn't be doing really shouldn't be doing it in that way because it's going to then have knock-on effects. I find it really hard to not say anything. And actually it would have you thought about doing it this way? I get you have to have these conversations with people, but do you have to have them in the middle of the workplace? Can you have them somewhere else? Can you give people the afternoon off or that kind of thing? So, yeah, I find it really quite hard to see where the boundaries are when you're dealing with people, because just like you can't deal with people on what they're like at work because they've got a whole other life, you also can't just narrow it down to your interaction with them. It's also what else is happening in the organisation and how they're being impacted by different areas in the organisation.
I actually have stories of people that stay in their lane for too long, and actually they will see stuff that they can help with, and they say nothing and do nothing. The army officer, Australian, I can't remember his name, and he said something like, the standard you walk by is the standard you accept.
Remember that one.
And then at the same time, like when you say, it's hard for me to stay in my lane, I don't even know why we have lanes. I think and I understand some project managers say, do not talk to these people. I'm paying you or we've got a certain number of hours. And it's such a boring conversation. It dehumanizes the whole experience. I am not in that space anymore, thank God, because the projects that I accept now and I want to work on, I see big value for the organization. And sometimes, to be honest, again, this is not an attack on any project manager. It's important for me when I accept to work on a project now, I need to understand who the project manager is. I actually literally indirectly interview these people because, again, I can tick the boxes with my eyes closed. But there's my conscience in there, and I sincerely care about how people feel. One of the things that I have at the back of my mind is that if we do good change experience in the workplace, morale and engagement will improve.
Absolutely.
And if that happens at scale, call me a dreamer, one of the highest levels of triggers for us in depression and unhappiness and all of that is that we live in unhappy workplaces. And then we go home and then we just complain about the day, and tomorrow is another day. And I'm thinking, if the majority of the work of what we do at work is around change and managing change, there's always change. A decision by a leader is a change anyway. If we do these really well, we can influence society.
Yeah. When I first started out to be a consultant, I wanted to change the world.
You can change one project at a time.
Yes. Plans. Yes. I had grand plans. And then I very quickly realized that, maybe I couldn't change the entire world, but I needed mates. I needed other people.
Yeah.
And so that kind of made me segue into what I'm doing now.
And somebody like you who values relationships and connections, how do you manage with the hybrid world of online? Actually, majority of it is online nowadays. How do you manage that?
I'm a very proactive communicator and a very proactive connection builder, if you like. If you're a friend of mine, that's it. But I don't let you go. I'm always like, so how's it going? Once you're a friend of mine, that's it. You may as well just accept that you're going to be a friend for life. So I am very proactive like that as well in terms of stakeholder engagement. And also I have networks all over the world these days, and I network with intentionality as well. I am thinking about how I can assist them. I'm always looking at ways that I can help them rather than what they can give me. So I guess that's always a good relationship builder. And once you're doing stuff for people want to reciprocate. It's just human behavior. But So I guess I wasn't always like that, but I do it intentionally. And so hybrid for me is perfect because it means that I can stay connected with people all over the world so much easier. And then I get the joy of meeting up with people in real life in London and other places. And yeah, and then those relationships are cemented.
The reason why I'm asking about that is deep inside of me, I was always hoping that at some stage we're going to get back into the workplace. But the world has moved on now. There's a lot of conversations now again around hybrid. Do you know that there are some organizations now, not in Australia, but overseas, started thinking maybe they need to pay people who work online different pay packets than actually face-to-face. And so watch this conversation happening in there, which is...
Actually, the organisation I'm working at the moment mandates full-time in the office. There is no working from home.
Yeah, some organizations can afford to say that, and depending on the work and the context and all of these things. And
there is an upside.
There's always, yeah.
And that is, as soon as I walk out the door, I'm done with work for the evening because there's no, you can't remote access things.
Yes.
So my day is actually done when I leave home, when I leave work. Whereas when I'm working from home, my days often stretch into the evenings and there's more of a blur. So the upside is it's very clearly demarcated work and not work.
Yes. We are getting into more digitally connected world anyway. And I know you mentioned you're not into AI, or what did you say? What was your statement?
I'm not an AI expert. Yeah, I'm not someone who knows. I know a lot. I know some about it, but I'm not someone if someone would go to ask questions about AI. Having said that, I did read a book back in, I can't remember when it was, but maybe 2017, and it was called "Thank You for Being Late," and I was attracted to it because of the title, because I'm often late. But it was around AI, and he called it the intelligent assistant rather than AI, which he called it IA, which was quite cool. But it was all around big data and all of that kind of thing, and I really liked it. And one of the things that he did was he'd set up meetings this is in New York, to 6 a.m. in a coffee shop. And if someone was late to the meeting, he would really use that time to people watch and actually have a bit of a break. And so when people would hurriedly come into the coffee shop and say, "I'm really sorry I'm late," and he goes, "No, thank you for being late." And that has really stuck with me. But yeah, so I've been interested in large data sets and all that kind of stuff and AI a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any manner.
Yeah, I think I wasn't going to ask you about the large language models and algorithms, but I was going to say that the promise of AI, or part of the promise, is that at some stage it's going to be a group of humans plus a number of agents. And it's not like we need more technology into our lives. What I'm thinking about, what is the second and perhaps the third order impact of a new technology coming over and sticking itself, whether we like it or not, has already enforced itself into our own orbit.
Yeah, I use AI in some things. I am worried, but I also think that it's part of it's the next industrial revolution, right? And people would have thought similarly, I'm sure, when we moved from farming to factories, that human value and all of that kind of stuff was changed forever, and it was. And I think we'll become different, but we'll still be human, and there'll still be a place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm comfortable in it in terms of having had a long career. I know how to do things from scratch. I know how to drive an Excel spreadsheet, and I know I can do all of that. My concern is for the people who are new to a career, who don't actually have those battle scars or those junior jobs that are being more and more replaced by AI.
And agents,
And agents. And so it's like kids or people who've always used calculators rather than worked out approximately how much something is going to be, or they've got no idea if it's right or wrong because they haven't had that experience. But that'll happen, I'm sure, in other ways, and maybe the focus will be a bit different. And there will always be people-related jobs that won't be replaced by AI. So, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think some of it will disappear, but new ones will happen. Before COVID and before the Ukraine war, many industries in the States started struggling with jobs, and some jobs closed and all of that. But there was a new job all of a sudden created called the drone pilot.
Yeah.
Around 2018, there were 250,000 jobs of drone pilots in the States.
Wow.
It came out of nowhere. It was actually today is more because all of a sudden spread into the army and all of that. They call them pilots. And the innovation now is quite amazing. So I have no doubt that some jobs will disappear. That's fine, but the new ones will evolve. And then you mentioned something around, some people say life is not going to be the same, good old days and all of that. And I'm with you. I think we're just going to have a new shade of life, a new shade of relationships and with the technology, and life will go on. When Siri came along, that's fine. I can still talk to my phone, and I can still talk to Sarah, and I can still talk to Gilbert.
That's right.
So I think we just evolve that way. Do we need to keep eyes open? Of course we do, like with any other thing. And that's how I look at it anyway.
Yeah.
But then again, I do think about my son. I do think about, I think he mentioned something around we need to understand how these things work, and therefore, do I lose my critical thinking or my judgment sometimes, and I heavily rely on that. My son thinks right now, he's 16, he thinks that Google is the truth.
Yeah.
And he challenges me. And the other day he was thinking ChatGPT is not the truth, but Google is the truth.
Yeah.
And so can you see where we ended up with arguing over one technology and rather than the other one?
Yeah, if you remember, I was going to an event after we met in London in Wales called How the Light Gets In. And there was a lot of really big picture ideas there, which were really interesting. And one of them was around it was Gutenberg versus Zuckerberg. And it was like, is Mark Zuckerberg fulfilling the Gutenberg dream of democratization of knowledge? Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think of it that way. Your son is accessing knowledge that he might not have ever been able to access. But where's the judgment of whether that's the right knowledge? And the algorithms, feed you what you want to believe, and you can find an argument for anything you want to believe online. So, it's interesting. I must admit now, it used to annoy me when I would talk about something randomly, and then the next thing there would be an ad on my phone for it because it would pick it up. But now I'm like, I will accidentally on purpose talk about things around my phone because it's easier than searching for it. Yes. It's about taking advantage of the technology too.
Taking advantage is actually a good way of looking at it. I want to circle back to the idea of change. There's always a level of uncertainty around any change. Does that mean that one way that leaders can help with managing the uncertainty is to actually strengthen the human relationship fabric of a team?
I think so. I like it. I'm sure you're all across the scarf, and that certainty is one of the key things in there. I think the uncertainty is framed badly as well. I think sometimes being a bit uncertain about something is exciting. And so we want to pathologize things so much and want to make everything sound so negative, but there's actually not that much difference between feeling uncertain about something and feeling excited about something. And so I think the difference may well be in the relationship that you have with someone. If you feel excited about the prospect of heading off to the unknown because you've got a relationship with this person and it sounds exciting, as opposed to uncertainty because you don't really know what you're going to do next and all that kind of stuff, and you're not really trusting the person that you're with. I'm probably not explaining myself very well, but Like, I think it's the same thing, but from a different perspective.
I think I like this, Sarah. I think if I hear you right, if we have the right relationship in a place, then the uncertainty can create curiosity. So I get closer to it.
Yeah.
If I don't have strong relationships in a place, the uncertainty can create anxiety and threat.
Yeah.
You said
much better than me.
Well, because this idea of when there's a change, there's two movements that happen. Some people will get close to the change, meaning I'm curious about it.
Yes.
And some people will walk away from the change, meaning I don't want to have a part of this.
Yeah.
But these are movements associated with emotions. And so any change that you announced in any place, immediately, like a government, workplace, family, any change. If you even have roadblocks around your area, that is a change that some people will hate, and then some people is like, yeah, I don't mind. And some people is like, thank God there's not a lot of traffic in my area. So we come at the change from different angles.
Yeah.
And what we're saying here is that if there are good conditions in a place, then the uncertainty will dial up a sense of a curiosity about it.
Yeah, curiosity and excitement.
And excitement. In fact, artists don't like certainty. The whole creativity comes from uncertainty. The ambiguity is actually important. And I'll share with you the story of the knights for King Arthur. When King Arthur asked them to go and find the Holy Grail, the story goes that the knights came out and then there's a big forest in front of them. Which direction shall they go? And so they decided to go through the direction or the part of the forest where it was least known to them. And so they went through the unknown because for them the unknown is where the knowledge will be. And so sometimes the unknown is far more exciting than the known. Because then you'll be surprised, your knowledge will expand. It's not going to be comfortable, but gaining knowledge is not comfortable. But once you're there.
Yeah, I'm also wondering whether we're seeing a decrease in curiosity because there's just so much available at our fingertips, and maybe that's mitigating some of the risks that we would have had. We've got Google Maps and
I haven't really thought about that, Sarah. Yeah, I'm quite happy with my GPS, but there are things that actually, it's a great point because I am still curious about so many things. Maybe not about the topic itself, but maybe the depth of the knowledge about a topic.
Yeah. Ask your 16-year-old if he can tell you which way's north. It's just little things like that. It scares me that people don't have that level of curiosity that they will know that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and the one of the other things that I've heard recently, which I thought we talk about with AI and all that kind of stuff, lost skills. But one of the lost skills I heard raised recently was memorization, because we don't need to memorize things anymore.
The concept of memory now is being challenged completely. We don't need to memorize phone numbers. We just need to remember a person's name. Like I just need to remember your name and I can press it, go, Ali, and I don't need to remember your phone number. But like previously, you'd know 20 people's phone numbers easily because you had to. Right? Yeah. Now you just need to remember their names. Yes. And we hope that all of this technology that can give us a space to start thinking of building better relationships because we have time for that. That's the intention anyway. I want to shift gear. I know you are a super organizer for a change management or a change conference here in Australia. Talk to us about your conference.
So Australasian Change Days, it started in 2020 and the intention was to bring Change Days, which I had attended for a number of years in Berlin, to Australia. But of course, 2020 was when nothing was happening at all in terms of get-togethers. So we decided to pivot to virtual, which was a big thing back then. And it's just so bread and butter these days that you forget that even as close as 2020, it was still quite novel. So we did our first event in 2020 virtually, and then 2021 virtually for the same reason. In 2022, I was like, oh, maybe people are ready to come back. But people were not ready to come back. And ever since, I have kind of tested the waters with people going, should we try an in-person event? And they have said, no, we love attending virtually. And I think the reason people loved attending virtually is that we managed to get some amazing people, both participants and facilitators, from overseas. And so then people that you wouldn't necessarily get access to. And certainly if we were in person, I wouldn't be able to afford their plane tickets and their accommodation. But it's a really great community, and we look at things. Every year we have a theme. So this year the theme's Uncharted. And the theme kind of comes out of what's been happening in the world and in the change community. In fact, our first theme was connectedness, because connectedness was really important in 2020. So each year we have a theme, and we ask facilitators to apply to be a facilitator based on that theme. And then we curate an event around it. And it's not about tools and techniques and things like that. It's about asking bigger questions. It's about having conversations with people. And I'm really delighted that we are coming back for our 7th year, but I'm also delighted that people love it so much. And they feel like they're in the room, even though it's an event that I like to go to. And I've heard nothing but good from people, which is always nice when you're the convener.
And everybody is invited to this from any part of the world, yeah?
Absolutely. We give pretty big discounts if you're more than 5 hours outside our time zone, but because you can really literally only go to half of it unless you're asleep, you're sleepwalking. We do have someone in Europe who time shifts just for the conference, and they come to all the sessions, which is very impressive. But yeah, everyone's welcome, and we pay all our facilitators, and we just do it for the community, really.
That is wonderful. And I'm going to put all the information about the conference and in the episode and the link. In my opinion, this is Sarah doing what Sarah does well, which is, again, creating a space for people to connect, build relationships, and learn at the same time. And congratulations for all the work that you're doing in there. And what is the theme for this year?
Uncharted. What happens when there's no map about where to go, what to do?
We just talked about it already. The unknown is far more exciting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we have all the maps of old with dragons on them. And
Yes. The idea is that the treasure is always protected by a dragon.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to go through the belly of the dragon to get to the treasure. Good luck with it. That is very exciting. That's absolutely very exciting. And I hope everybody can join this. Sarah, it's been a pleasure having you in my podcast. Final thing for you, what would be your advice to the change management community or the practice around how important it is to build those formal and informal relationships?
My advice, I think, get in early and try and figure out the relationships between different parties and what's happened before. History is really important. You don't go into anything with a clean slate. Food works well.
Food works, yes.
Food works well. Yeah, morning teas, afternoon teas, and things like that. But I think if you have a way of bringing people together around a fun purpose, then that will give you lots of credibility early on. So,
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Food makes a huge difference, and bring people close to the campfire and have a conversation. I think that will be really wonderful and a great experience. It makes life way easier for people. And at some stage, I want to get you back, and I want to go deeper into this idea of, can we have an informal code of conduct for the change management practice. And we'll take it from there. Sarah, until next time, stay well and stay safe.
Thanks, Ali. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hi, it's ChatGPT here. Recently, I have been adding my reflections to Ali's The Inner Game of Change podcast, and this conversation with Sarah Glenister reminded me that some of the most important forces shaping change are often the ones we cannot see. We spend a great deal of time talking about project plans, milestones, and technology. Yet Sarah kept bringing us back to something much deeper, the quality of our relationships. It reminded me of Donella Meadows' observation that the most influential parts of a system are often invisible. Trust, informal influence, and human connection rarely appear on a project plan, yet they often determine whether change succeeds or quietly fades away. One moment that particularly stood out was the discussion about certainty. Neuroscience tells us that our brains naturally seek certainty, but Sarah offered a subtle insight. When trust is present, uncertainty can become curiosity rather than anxiety. Perhaps the role of a leader is not to eliminate uncertainty, because that is impossible, but to build the relationships that give people the confidence to move towards it. I also had to smile when Sarah said she was not really an AI expert. I suspect many listeners smiled too. The irony is that throughout the conversation, she demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking that AI cannot easily replicate. She spoke about trust, meaning, relationships, judgment, and curiosity. In many ways, that is precisely the conversation we should be having about AI. Not what the technology can do, but what makes us more human because it exists. The conversation also left me wondering about something we did not have time to explore. How do we measure the strength of a relationship? Perhaps it is not measured by how often we speak or how long we have known someone. Perhaps the real measure is much simpler. When uncertainty arrives, are they available? Do they support us? Can we rely on each other? Maybe the strength of a relationship is revealed not in moments of comfort, but in moments of change. I also appreciated Ali's observation that we are in the business of influence and relationship building. It reinforces the idea that change is not simply about implementing something new. It is about helping people make sense of what is changing and finding meaning together. Before I go, Sarah is also the convener of Australasian Change Days, an annual event that brings together change practitioners from around the world. This year's theme is Uncharted, which feels like the perfect theme for the times we are living in. If today's conversation resonated with you, it might be a wonderful opportunity to continue exploring these ideas with a global community of change practitioners. One of the best ways to gain a sense of control over change is not by resisting it, but by embracing it.
Thank you for listening to the Inner Game of Change. If there is one thing I've learned through those conversations, it is that change is never just something that happens around us. It is something we participate in. Every conversation, every experiment, and every new perspective helps us navigate it a little better. And remember, one of the best ways to have a sense of control over any change is by simply embracing it. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and keep playing your inner game of change.